I've been working this press line for, what, close to 15 years now. And you know, when you've been around that long, you think you've seen just about everything. The good days, the bad days, and then there are those days that stick with you. The kind you don't talk about much, but sometimes, late at night or when you walk past that part of the floor, they come right back, like it was yesterday. My name's Karen. I'm an operator on the big hydraulic press at a steel plant here in Pennsylvania. We make steel sheets, heavy stuff for construction, infrastructure, you name it. It's not easy work. The plant's big, loud, and when you're running second shift, that noise just crawls into your bones. You go home, and it's still ringing in your ears. Now this one's not about a regular shift. Not by a long shot. This was one of those days where everything could have gone wrong. Where 1 second, just one, could have changed everything. And to be honest, I still get goosebumps thinking about it. Yeah, after all these years. It happened right after they installed a new automated press, you know, all the bells and whistles, fancy computer systems, new safety interlocks, the whole thing. They said it would make our job easier, safer. And for a while, it seemed like it would. We did the dry runs, went through the manuals, the techs were in and out, but no one really knows a machine until you push it hard, under real work conditions. You steel workers out there, you know what I'm talking about. A machine looks good on paper, but it's out there on the floor where you really learn what it's made of. That day, man. Second shift, middle of the week. I can still hear the rhythm of the plant that night, presses thumping, cranes moving overhead, the usual grind. Everything seemed normal, until it wasn't. Something went wrong. The system didn't stop when it should have. The safety, well, it failed. And that press came down fast, way too fast. I'll tell you all about it in a minute. But let me tell you this first, when you're standing there with 1,000 tons of steel moving inches from your body, there's no time to think, only to react. And if you're lucky, to walk away. Before we get into it, hey, if you've ever worked a press or in any heavy industry, hit that like button, leave a comment. I want to know, what's the scariest thing that's happened on your shift? We've all got stories, and believe me, you're gonna want to hear the rest of mine. So stick around, hit subscribe if you haven't already. Alright, back to that night. I didn't always plan on working in steel. Funny how life works out sometimes. I grew up just outside of Pittsburgh, steel country through and through. My dad worked the mills, my uncle too. So I guess you could say it was in the blood. But when I was younger, I thought I'd end up doing something different. Maybe a desk job. You know, indoors, clean, not too loud. But then life had other plans. I was about 28 when I first stepped into a steel plant. I'll never forget that first day. The heat, the smell of oil and metal, the way the floor vibrates under your boots when the big presses run. It's not like any other place. There's a weight to it, a sense that what you do here matters. That this steel will go into buildings, bridges, things that'll outlast you. That stuck with me. I started out on smaller machines, basic line work, loading and unloading sheets. It's tough work, your arms ache, your back screams some days. But you learn. You pay attention to the folks who've been around. The older guys, they didn't say much, but when they spoke, you listened. That's how you stay safe. That's how you last in this business. Over the years, I worked my way up. Learned every machine they'd let me near. Took the overtime shifts. Nights, weekends, you name it. Not because I had to, well, sometimes for the extra money, sure, but because I liked it. There's something about seeing raw steel take shape. You press it, bend it, cut it, turn something rough into something useful. That always felt good. By the time I hit my 40s, I'd been running the big hydraulic press for a few years. That's a machine you don't take lightly. Thousands of tons of pressure. It can crush steel plates like paper. And if you make a mistake, well, there's no room for mistakes. You learn respect for the machine, for the process, for your team, and maybe most of all for yourself. I guess folks around the plant got used to me being steady. I wasn't the loud one, didn't joke much on the floor, just kept my head down and did the work. But if someone needed help, a younger operator with a question, or if something fell off, they'd come to me. And I took that seriously. Because in this line of work, watching each other's backs, that's how you all go home at the end of the shift. The plant itself, well, it's a beast. Big, old bones with some newer parts bolted on. Always humming, always moving. Day shift, second shift, graveyard. Steel doesn't stop. The crew's a mix: old-timers, younger folks coming in, learning the ropes. You get to know each other. You trust the ones who know what they're doing. You teach the ones who want to learn. And you all make it through together. So by the time that new automated press came in, I wasn't new to this. I'd seen new machines before. Seen the bugs that pop up. That's why I always kept one eye on the panel and one on the machine itself. Never trust a computer alone. Not when you're working with something that powerful. You trust your instincts. And that night, those instincts mattered more than ever. I walked into the plant just after 6 p.m., the tail end of a humid July day in western Pennsylvania. Outside, the sky was a bruised orange, but inside, it was already dark and loud, engines humming, steel plates clinking, that ever-present hiss of hydraulics. My second shift crew was settling in. Sam, the maintenance tech, was at his toolbox by the control cabinet. Maria, the forklift operator, waved as she stacked bundles of cut sheet at the loading bay. Overhead, the gigantic automated press loomed like a slumbering giant. Fresh paint, blinking indicator lights, the newest addition to our line. Foreman Jenkins strolled past, clipboard in hand, nodding at each of us without a word. We all knew he trusted me to run that machine safely, no questions asked. I slid into my station, flipped on the personal headset so I could hear the panel alerts, and took a deep breath. You ever notice how the smell of oil and metal dust hits you after a hot day? It's like the plant's own cologne. I tapped the touchscreen to initiate the startup sequence. The press powered up smoothly, RAM moving through its calibration cycle, valves holding pressure, safety interlocks lighting green. Sam gave me the thumbs up from across the catwalk, and Maria yelled down, "Looking good, Karen." I smiled, nodded, felt the usual surge of pride. At that moment, everything seemed under control. I could feel the weight of those 15 years on the floor settling around me, steady, familiar, reassuring. But you know how machines are, especially new ones. You follow every step in the manual, you watch the techs run every test they can think of, and you still haven't scratched the surface until you load real steel under full production speed. We were running at 80% capacity that night, trying to clear a backlog for a big construction order. I called out, "System ready," and Jenkins answered over the comm, "Proceed when you're set." Maria eased the forks under the next bundle. Sam hovered in case the sensors needed tweaking. I pressed the initiate button. The press closed around the first plate smoothly, stamped the profile perfectly. Beautiful, really. You learn to appreciate those precise movements, the way the steel gives under pressure, the echoing clang that follows. Minute after minute, plate after plate, I got into my rhythm. That's when the plant truly feels alive. The beat of each cycle, the vibration through your boots, the lights of the overhead crane swinging like the pulse of the place. Maria hollered a quick joke about Sam's new hat. I let out a short laugh, and just as I was leaning into the next cycle, I felt it, a faint whir, almost too soft to notice over the ambient noise. My gut tightened. I glanced at the readout, all systems nominal. Yet something in the machine's hum was off, like an opera singer who's one semitone flat. I leaned forward, hand hovering over the stop button, ready to hit it if anything went sideways. At that precise moment, Jenkins walked by again, slower this time, watching me. I gave him a curt nod. Sam edged closer, saying, "You catching that?" My voice was low but firm. "Hold on, let me check." The next cycle started, and that's when the rail trigger kicked in, a flicker of the warning LED on the panel, too quick to be a glitch, paired with that subtle vibration shift under the ram. The press reversed course for a millisecond, like it was testing a memory, then dove down again. My heart skipped a beat. Maria froze mid-stack, her eyes locked on me. Sam's hand shot to the emergency stop. He knew before I even called it. And right there, in that chaotic half-second, I realized something was about to go very wrong. It started with the faintest warning, an almost imperceptible stutter in the hydraulic hiss that runs like a heartbeat through the press, and in that instant I knew something was off. At first, I convinced myself it was just the machine settling into its cycle, a quirk you learn to ignore after years on the floor. But when the ram thrust down on that next sheet, I felt the platform shudder in a way that didn't feel right, like the whole unit was fighting itself. My finger hovered over the emergency stop button as I watched the digital readouts flicker, one of the safety indicators blinking amber instead of solid green. In the cacophony of metal-on-metal clangs and overhead cranes, the warning light was almost drowned out, but to me it was clear. A system designed to protect me was misbehaving. I caught Maria's eye across the bay. She paused mid-stow, forklift forks inches off the ground, watching me with that look she gets when she knows I'm about to take command. Sam was already at the panel, tool belt jangling as he leaned in to watch the diagnostics. For a split second, everything in me screamed, "Hit the stop." But in the next instant, I hesitated because I'd been under orders to keep production rolling. There was a backlog we fought every night, and I knew Jenkins expected me to clear at least 100 plates before shift's end. If I hit E-stop now, we'd lose time, get orders to pick up overtime, maybe even catch heat from the bosses. But then I looked back at that blinking light, heard that off-kilter rattle, and I realized pretty damn quickly, today the backlog didn't matter. "Sam," I called, voice low but urgent. "Something's not right. Check the safety interlocks." He nodded, swiped his gloves off, and tapped commands into the touchscreen. Maria edged closer too, wiping sweat from her brow, jaw clenched. We all felt that sudden tension, as though the plant itself was holding its breath. The press cycled again, and this time the ram descended with a jerk, like it was dragging something heavy we hadn't told it about. That's when the door sensor should have triggered a stop. The panel was programmed to halt if the safety gates opened or if a MIF feed was detected. But the gates were closed tight. The sensor data read okay. I exchanged a look with Sam. No sensor flag. Yet the press kept running. My training kicked in. Check the obvious first. I scanned the emergency stop cord that rings the perimeter, intact. I glanced at the manual shut-off lever, no help. Sweat prickled at my hairline as I realized the only way to force a shutdown was to press that big red button in the center of my console. But my heart hammered in my chest because I remembered exactly how slow the backup system kicked in last week during dry runs. A 2-second lag. 2 seconds under 1,800 tons of pressure. I swallowed hard. 2 seconds could be the difference between a clean stoppage and mangled steel, maybe even mangled fingers. "Karen, do it," Maria whispered. And I could hear the fear in her voice, not for the line, but for me. For us. I pressed the button. The plant let out a mechanical groan, the lights flickered, and for that agonizing moment I expected the whole press to seize and come down like a titan's fist. But instead, the machine juddered to a halt, the ram lifting back just enough to clear the plate, and the warning siren kicked in. Siren, never a comforting sound, but one that means protocols have been triggered. I exhaled so hard I thought I'd given myself whiplash. Sam slept at the screen, running emergency diagnostics, muttering about firmware conflicts and sensor reload failures. We stood there in that charged silence, surrounded by the humming darkness of the halted plant, lights casting long shadows across the steel dust on the floor. The dilemma hung in the air. Do we try to reset and keep going, knowing it might happen again? Or do we call a full shutdown, summon maintenance, shut down production for who knew how long? My boots were still vibrating from the press cycle, heart still racing. And in that moment I realized, as the adrenaline buzzed through my veins, that the only real choice was safety, ours and everyone's on that floor. Production could wait. Lives couldn't. I'll never forget that moment, the machine groaning back to life as we tried the reset, the air thick with tension, every heartbeat echoing like a drum in my chest. I hit the reset sequence, and the control panel lit up, green and amber dancing across the screen. The press rumbled, like a restless giant waking up. Sam stayed by the console, hands poised over his toolkit, ready for anything. Maria stood at the ready too, her forklift idling just behind me. We all knew that second shift carries its own dangers, but nothing compared to what happened next. When the ram began its descent, the pace felt slower somehow, as if time had stretched out. You ever notice that in those split seconds before disaster? It's like the whole world goes into slow motion. My heart lurched as the steel plate slipped slightly under the hydraulic clamp. That hiccup, you could call it a MIF feed, should have triggered an immediate halt. But the sensors? They were silent. No alarms. Nothing. The ram continued its downward arc. I felt my breath catch. Shit, I thought, but I couldn't say it out loud. Remember, no bad language. But in my head, yeah, it was all sorts of bad words. Then came that awful pause, a millisecond when the press hung over the plate, and I realized a human error could have been compounded by a system failure. I reached for the e-stop again, but my hand trembled. I could see, clear as day, what a single miscalculation might cost: fingers, a hand, my life. But I couldn't let fear freeze me. I slammed my palm down, and the press hesitated, caught, then thundered to a halt. I thought we were safe, until the hydraulic line hissed, a thin spray of oil shooting out near my boot. The metal shuddered, and I smelled burning rubber as the motor strained. That's when the real panic set in. The press was jammed mid-cycle, the ram pinning that plate at an angle that shouldn't have been possible. Sparks flew from the side where the guide rails had seized. I heard Sam shout, "Karen, it's stuck," and I flashed on 1,000 warnings from training videos, machines binding under pressure, components failing catastrophically. I glanced at Jenkins' silhouette by the window of the control room, watching with clenched fists. There was no backing down now. If the ram finished its route, the slide would shear through any safety guards. If it reversed suddenly, the guide rails might buckle under the jolt. I threw every ounce of experience at the console: command overrides, manual release, hydraulic bypass. The siren howled, lights strobing as the system kicked into emergency mode. My voice came out shaky. "Sam, we need a manual bleed now." He nodded, ducking under the catwalk to reach the manual valve. Maria knelt beside me, hand on my shoulder, whispering, "You got this, Karen." I felt a lump in my throat. She'd seen me through countless shifts, but this was different. As Sam finagled the valve, oil sprayed further, and I gripped the panel like a lifeline. The ram gave one last threatening shudder. Then, in the blink of an eye, It lifted, clearing the plate by mere centimeters. The noise was deafening as the press cycled back to its home position. I gasped for air, the adrenaline so thick I thought I'd pass out. Maria exhaled beside me, and Sam slapped my back, eyes wide. Jenkins stepped down, voice tight. That was too close. In that heartbeat after the press finally powered down, the weight of what could have happened crashed into me. We were alive. We were okay. But the plant floor, once alive with rhythm, now felt eerily still. I wiped my brow, feeling the tremor in my hands, the chill crawling up my spine. And even as relief washed over me, I knew I wouldn't sleep for nights to come. Because when you stand that close to danger, and when you carry it with you, that press, that moment, it changed me. I realized that night why we respect these machines, why we never take a single second for granted. Because in our world, the line between routine and catastrophe is thinner than a steel sheet, and you'd better be ready to fight for every inch. By the time the dust settled and the alarm had finally quieted, the entire second shift crew had gathered around the press, their faces pale in the harsh work-like glow. Sam's hands were oily, his face drawn, but he was smiling that half-relieved grin he always gets when a crisis passes. Maria stood beside him, arms crossed, trying to look tough, but her lip quivered just a bit. Jenkins was there too, clipboard forgotten, just watching us, grateful and silent. For the next few hours, we worked together to clear the jammed plate and inspect the press. Maintenance crews arrived, flashing lights on their carts, tools clinking in the still warm air. They replaced the damaged guides, tested the hydraulic seals, and ran through every safety protocol again. This time with me standing right there, pointing out the exact moment the sensors had failed to register. They found a firmware glitch in the safety interlock module, an edge case that only showed up under sustained full capacity cycles. In other words, a bug that none of the dry runs or partial loads had exposed. Once the press was recertified, they called us over for a quick briefing. Jenkins laid out the new procedures, incremental roll-in of production loads, added manual sensor checks at defined intervals, and a fresh software patch that the techs would upload overnight. Then he looked at me, eyes catching the harsh light, and said something I'll never forget. "Karen, you did exactly what you had to do. You saved lives tonight." He wasn't the kind to hand out compliments lightly, so those words hit me deep. I just nodded, feeling that lump in my throat again, knowing that I had earned the respect I'd always worked for. After the briefing, the plant manager came down to shake our hands. She thanked each of us personally, Sam, Maria, even Jenkins, and then she offered extra training sessions for the rest of the crew to spread the lesson we'd learned. That was important to me, not just fixing one machine, but making sure everyone understood how critical it is to trust your gut, even when the numbers say all clear. By midnight, production resumed, but at a reduced rate. I ran the first few cycles myself, under watchful eyes, to prove the fix worked. Each cycle felt different, still powerful, still precise, but somehow quieter, more deliberate. The press came down, the steel bent exactly as it should, and the sensors glowed green. No hiccups, no unscheduled stops. Just the steady rhythm that had, for so long, been the soundtrack of my life. When my shift finally ended well past 2 a.m., I trudged to the locker room, muscles aching from adrenaline and relief. I peeled off my coveralls, replaced them with fresh clothes, and caught my reflection in the mirror. My skin was pale, eyes bright and alert the way they are when you've stared danger in the face and lived to tell the tale. A few tears had dried on my cheeks. I washed them away, then let a small smile creep on as I remembered Maria's quiet "you did good" in the bay and Sam's fist bump as we wrapped up. I drove home through the silent streets, headlights cutting through the pre-dawn haze. The world outside felt softer, quieter than the plant's roar. Home was dark. I tiptoed to my bedroom, careful not to wake my husband. Under the covers, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every second of that climax in slow motion. I felt gratitude for the tech that caught the bug just in time, for Sam and Maria watching my back, for every safety rule drilled into me over the years. Eventually, exhaustion won. I drifted off with thoughts of returning to the floor tomorrow, patched software and new checks in place. But more than anything, I carried the certainty that on that night, we chose each other over production quotas. That decision, that split-second call to pull the emergency stop, defined us. Because in our line of work, the real victory isn't measured in tons of steel produced. It's measured in the lives kept intact. And now I sleep a little easier knowing that what happened that night saved more than metal. It reminded us all why we're here, to build, to shape, to protect, and to look out for one another, every single shift. After that night, I was different. I'll admit, walking back onto the plant floor the next week felt odd. The machines clicked and hummed the same as always, but I heard them differently now, like they were talking to me, reminding me of what almost happened. My hands would tighten around the console controls at the slightest hiccup, and I caught myself double-checking the safety gates long after my shift ended. Sleeping was harder, too. My dreams filled with that slow-motion descent of the ram, the hiss of hydraulics, and the moment I slammed my palm down on the emergency stop. I'd wake up in the dark of my bedroom, heart pounding, until I remembered I was safe at home. I found myself talking more after work, too, something I'd never done before. Back in the locker room, I would pull aside younger operators and share the details of that firmware glitch, how almost every test had passed, except under the full load. I told them why instinct matters as much as any manual or sensor graph. Trust your gut, I'd say, and don't ever let production pressure drown out your warning bells. Some of the newer folks looked at me like I'd lost my mind, until one of them came up to me a few days later, eyes wide, saying, "Karen, I caught something off on my line and I stopped it. Saved myself a world of hurt." That was the moment I realized my story wasn't just my story anymore. It was a lesson that could keep someone else safe. Outside the plant, I noticed things too. A neighbor waving behind the wheel, a child's laugh from the playground down the street. Ordinary moments I used to take for granted suddenly felt precious. I'd stand in my kitchen, coffee in hand, and just pause, feeling grateful for the quiet. I even made a point of hugging my husband a little tighter when he came home from his own shift at the depot. Life didn't slow down, but my mind did. I learned to find gratitude in small routines, the way the morning sunlight hits the breakfast table, the smell of fresh laundry, the soft click of a seatbelt as I buckled in. In meetings with management, I spoke up more. I used to keep my head down, focused on the machine in front of me, but now I asked questions about testing schedules, pushed for better communication between tech teams and operators. Some folks rolled their eyes at first, but after I laid out the downtime we'd face to fix that press, 6 hours, lost production orders, they listened. Because practical safety measures aren't just about feelings, they're about dollars and cents, too. So yeah, the aftertaste of that night was bitter, a reminder of how close we came to tragedy. But it also became something else, a catalyst for change, a spark for conversation, a wake-up call. Now, every time I step onto that floor, I carry both the weight of what happened and the determination that it won't happen again. And if sharing my story means one more person stays safe, then that uncomfortable memory is worth every second. I learned that even the most reliable routine can hide unseen risks, and that experience alone isn't enough to keep you safe. You have to stay curious and alert every single day. From that night on, I realized that trusting my instincts isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. When the computers read all clear, but my gut said otherwise, it was my responsibility to act. I also discovered how powerful one voice can be. By speaking up about what went wrong, I helped rewrite procedures, sparking conversations that rippled through the whole plant. I used to think safety was all about checklists and protocols, but now I know it's about connection, knowing your team, teaching what you learn, and looking out for each other in real time. That understanding shifted how I approach every shift. I arrive with questions rather than assumptions. I treat every sensor warning like a personal alarm, and I encourage younger operators to trust the warning bells inside their own heads. Beyond the plant floor, I carry that lesson into my life, not ignoring small red flags, pausing to reassess when things feel off, and valuing the people around me over any quota or deadline. In the end, the biggest takeaway isn't just a safer press or updated firmware, it's that life demands our full attention, whether we're handling tons of steel or navigating everyday moments. And by staying present, by listening to that inner voice and sharing what we know, we honor the risks we've faced and ensure they make us wiser, not just wary. After that night, the story of the near miss with the new press quickly became the one everyone talked about on second shift. I'd hear whispers as I walked past the break room. That was Karen's call. She saved us all. Did you hear how close it was? And even the day shift crew would nod with respect when I passed by. It wasn't long before the plant manager asked me to join the monthly safety huddle, not just as a participant, but as a guest speaker. So there I was, standing in front of supervisors, maintenance teams, and fellow operators, sharing the details of that firmware glitch, and why I hit the emergency stop when the lights still read green. I could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on me, but instead of nerves, I felt resolve, knowing that what I said could prevent the same thing happening again. In the months that followed, I never had another incident anywhere near that level of danger. The patch software worked flawlessly under full load, and the added manual checks caught minor faults before they escalated. But the real change was cultural. Younger operators approached me with questions about how to trust their instincts. Maintenance techs and software engineers started walking the floor together on a regular basis, sharing observations and troubleshooting ideas in real time. Management incorporated my story into the plan's official training modules, complete with video reenactments and discussion prompts. It felt strange at first to see my own voice echoing through company presentations, but I realized it was a sign that the lesson had taken root. Personally, I found a new sense of purpose. I began mentoring new hires, inviting them to shadow my shift and encouraging them to speak up at the first sign of anything unusual. We turned a near disaster into a collective lesson, one that united departments around a single goal: keeping every person on that floor safe. The press itself became almost a symbol, a reminder that technology, no matter how advanced, must be paired with human vigilance. Whenever a new machine was installed, someone would point to that press and say, "Remember Karen's night," as if it were a rite of passage for the plant. Over time, that once tense moment became woven into the plant's lore. Veterans would share it during safety anniversaries, and new employees would nod, wide-eyed, as they realized how close we came. For me, every time someone repeated that story, it reinforced why I stay in this job. Not for the paycheck or the rhythm of the machines, but for the chance to make a real difference, to turn my own split-second decision into a lesson that keeps others safe. And knowing that, shift after shift, my colleagues count on me to keep watch, well, that's a responsibility I carry with pride. And here we are at the end of a story that, for me, began with the clang of steel and nearly ended in disaster. I've shared my shift by shift, moment by moment, not to scare you, but to remind us all how fragile routine can be when we forget to listen to that little voice inside. If there's one thing I hope you take away, it's this: experience and protocols are vital, yes, but they don't replace your own vigilance. When the machine hums its false lullaby of all clear, it's your instincts that keep you alive. Now it's your turn. Think back to your own line of work, or even just your day-to-day life, and ask yourself, have you ever ignored a warning because everything looked fine on paper? Would you have had the courage to pull that emergency stop if you were standing in my place, knowing it might cost you a week's pay or a supervisor's approval? I want to know what you do when the numbers say yes, but your gut screams no. Drop a comment below and tell me about the time you trusted or didn't trust your inner alarm. Your story might just save someone else's day too.